too far. I don't hear you. That's good. Today I, CA Khushbu Vagnani, an executive committee member of BCICI, is going to take you through the afternoon session of this conference. As announced earlier, let's find out who amongst us is the lucky winner. I would like to request CA George Isaac, Chairman ICI Doha, to please come on stage. CA George Isaac? Okay. Could I have Mr. Vivek Oberoi from Mashruq Bank to please come on stage to draw the raffle? Okay. So the winner is Rahul Ghoshal. Rahul Ghoshal from Solidarity Group. Do we have him here? Okay, he's not entitled. Next one, please. CA Pradeep Kumar Agarwal. CA Pradeep Kumar Agarwal. There you go. Yeah, come on. You've just eaten. A little bit of exercise is okay. Still. Congratulations, sir. Thank you. Okay, before we go on to the next speaker, we have a short info video about Tanjay Real Estate, who are the distributors of Larsen & Toubro realty, residential and commercial projects. Mahesh, could we have it? For more information on their projects, please visit their stand. We have it outside. Also, Nimai Consultants from Dubai, they have personalized visiting card holders for all of us with our name written on it. Please collect these visiting card holders with your name written on it from the Nimai stand. So moving on to our first speaker this afternoon. Our first speaker this afternoon is passionate about banking and finance like most of us, and in fact became a CA even before I was born. This veteran CA has been with Emirates NBD Group since September 2010 as their group CFO and has long-standing experience in Far East and Southeast Asia. His list of accolades go a long way, and these few minutes are not enough for me to summarize them. But what's interesting that I found about him, other than banking and finance, was his interest in traveling. He has visited more than 50 countries till date, and his favorite among these countries is none other than Switzerland. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome C.S. Surya with a big round of applause to share his thoughts on taming tomorrow's turbulences.
Khushbu. Good afternoon, fellow CAs, distinguished guests, and Khushbu, I will not ask when you were born. But perhaps we can have a show of hands. How many people in the room have a membership number less than 20,000? Not 200,000, 20,000. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm among 5 people in this room. So everybody is as young as you, Khushbu, don't worry. So I came in this morning from Dubai feeling very confident. How difficult is it to speak on a subject that's very poetic, taming tomorrow's turbulence? And then when I heard Bala speak so eloquently and Sanjay thereafter, I realized they've covered everything I had to say, and I was feeling quite turbulent during lunch because I have to say something new now to keep all of you awake. And then I reflected. I started my career almost this month, 30 years back in 1984, and I noticed that we've had many turbulent times, and I'm talking post-qualification. I remember I got my appointment letter in October 1984. I ran to my mom. She was in Chennai those days, and I said, "Mom, I've got a job." Before I started, that was the week Indira Gandhi was assassinated, those of you would remember. So that was turbulence even before I started, because I was stuck somewhere, I had to go join somewhere, and the whole country was in chaos. A few years after that, I migrated to Singapore, and for those of you who have been long established in this part of the world, there was another crisis happening here. That was the 1991 Gulf War. And Bala had mentioned in every crisis there is an opportunity. What was a crisis in this part of the world turned out to be an opportunity in Asia, because that's when the Asian tigers, another letter T, were just booming in the early 90s. And we thought it was very good. And then we had the 1997 Asian financial crisis, another turbulent year. Just about when we came out of it was 2003, the SARS crisis. Of course, by now with Ebola, bird flu, and other things, people have forgotten SARS, and not to mention the global financial crisis of recent years. So it almost seems as if we are going, sorry, let me get rid of my picture. How does this? Okay. Can somebody just bring the first slide, please? So we have been living in turbulent times always, I would say. So I'm going to start off by talking about the economy. You've heard some parts of it from Bala. I'll try not to repeat those. And Sanjay mentioned if nobody can predict the future. For my economist friends, if there are any in the room, I'll say they always predict the future right. They never get the timing right. That's the problem. Whatever they say happens, except it never happens when you want it to happen. So today we are looking at a global economy that is fraught with a lot of danger. Oil prices are not the only things that worry us. Let me have a quick show of hands. How many people here in this room have a mortgage anywhere in the world? Okay. So quite a few people, more than the 5 who have CA numbers below 20,000. And we have been going through a pace of low interest rates. And what I'm going to talk to you is going to give you some nightmares of turbulent times ahead, so put on your seatbelts. I was in Washington for the annual IMF meeting a few weeks back, and the world was divided into 4 parts. You had the people in the US who thought they were getting better, and data progressively shows they are getting better. You had the people in the Far East who were doing quite well, notwithstanding what you will hear about the China story. I've lived in that part of the world for 25 years. I think they will engineer a good landing for themselves. And by the way, what we are talking about China, these days when people tell you China is slowing down, they'll slow down to a 7% growth rate. There was a time when people thought 4% was very good even for the Western world. So it's really, everything is relative. And then I met a lot of people from the Middle East who felt very good, except they didn't know why they felt good. And that was before the oil shock. And then you had Europe, which clearly has problems and challenges. I won't go through, obviously, all the details in the slides, but I believe the Institute would have loaded it on the intranet so you can see some of the data and the charts there. But what this is showing is that economic growth is going to be a challenge. The US is picking up. They are talking about raising interest rates eventually. And the Eurozone, Eurozone, by the way, is an interesting concept, and we need to pay attention to that for 1 minute, because in the GCC they've spoken about it time and again. The Eurozone created some kind of a monetary union. They did not create a fiscal union. So anytime the GCC union is about to be set up and all of you have inputs, make sure that the union, if at all, is both monetary and fiscal. Otherwise, you'll have the same challenges that the Eurozone has, where there's production in one place, but the tax transfers don't happen to some other place and the economy starts crumbling. Oops, sorry. I think, can I take your assistance to move the slides forward, please? This is called the fat finger syndrome. Shows, again, we are of a generation where we don't know how to use those little texts and types. Japan, we've seen what's happened to Japan recently, and I think it was mentioned all the nations are missing their inflation targets. But the Japanese have made an art of living with their economy, however they call it, for the last 20, 30 years. And sometimes you think it may not be such a bad thing after all. They are relatively happy. China, I talked about. And for those of you who have never visited China, I would encourage you to visit. There's a lot of trade happening between China, the GCC, onto Africa. These were things that never happened before. Again, there's an element of turbulence that will come along with it. Nobody paid attention to Africa for many years, and all of a sudden you have Chinese economic interests going there. Longer term, you need to see what geopolitical tensions it creates, and for those of us who are sitting pretty much bang in that flight path, what does it mean to us? UK seems to be doing more or less okay. They got over the Scottish vote. Again, interesting, at the time of the Scottish vote, there was a lot of debate on North Sea oil. I don't think the Scots would worry about North Sea oil if the referendum were to be held today, and we just see how much the world has changed in just a span of 2 or 3 months. And then in MENA, as we clearly say, things are positive, but there will be multiple tracks running, broadly 2 tracks, and I will touch upon that in a minute. In the next slide, we continue with the economy. We've already heard about talk of the QE coming to an end, and here's where I talked about interest rates. The forecast is for interest rates to keep going up in 2015 on to 2016. May not be as high as the peak we saw pre-crisis, but just imagine if you are borrowing at a certain level, maybe 2-3%, and rates were going to go up by another 2% over the next 2 years, what happens to your servicing costs? Depending on where you start from, I have a mortgage in Singapore where interest rates are very low. I pay 1%. So if my interest rate were to, all of you can come to Singapore. If my interest rate goes to 3%, that's a 200% increase in the interest rate, and do I have the capacity to service that? The same is true of businesses for all those of you who are borrowing or have plans to borrow medium to long term in the future. Just understand where you stand. As Sanjay said, it goes back to cash flow management. Project your cash flows, see whether you want to hedge some of your bets today. Having said that, there's nothing called the perfect hedge. It is still a view, and you could go wrong just like our economist friends. Bond yields will rise, which means the capital values of the bonds will come down. So a lot of, there will be turbulence in financial markets whenever that happens, because bonds are used also commonly as hedging instruments. I would also say when I started my career in 1984, I thought being an accountant was a cushy life. I thought joining banking would be a cushy life. If I knew it was going to be so turbulent, I might have become an economist. Next slide, please. So all countries are going to start to raise rates. We have seen the US dollar strength. For all those of you who are earning in GCC-pegged currencies or having receivables in GCC-pegged currencies and feel good about it when you send remittances back home, just think about the future. A couple of years back, people would have said that a depegging, if at all it happens, would be beneficial to GCC currencies. But if oil goes to 60 and 40 and there is depegging, imagine what happens to your remittances. So that's something for each of us to reflect on. And I'll share with you my views of what I think will happen to oil. Next slide, please. So this is about how it will affect GCC and MENA. My view is the GCC will not be immediately affected. Because of the surpluses of the recent years, the region is a net creditor. They will manage. We heard about the immense liquidity in the system, so there's a bit of cushion to tide over the next few years. That also means you have time to adjust your business strategies, your reaction to what's going on out there, to see how you want to face the future in terms of your business and trade flows. A quick show of hands again, how many people in this room are auditors, internal auditors, external auditors, consultants? Thank you. So about a third of the room. You guys don't need to worry about turbulence because you'll get plenty of consulting opportunities to address many of these issues that I'm talking about. So it's just opportunity for you. Domestic interest rates could rise in the GCC, but as I said, there is excess liquidity, so we may not rise in tandem with US interest rates, so there would be some spreads opening up initially and then they could tighten. What is of greater concern would be all these public sector infrastructure projects that have been happening in the region that have been funded with excess receipts over and above what is the budgeted cost of oil for recent years. That would slow down. That would mean business contractions. That could mean challenges in the payment supply chain. We've seen that during the financial crisis. Whether or not we want to see it again really depends on how well the governments adjust to this. I think if it lasts for the next 1 or 2 years, there's no great challenge. But if oil prices continue to stay below what they call budget break-even, and yesterday there was a report on Bloomberg, so I'd refer you to that to see where the budget break-even is for each of the GCC nations, it could spell some challenges. And I talked about the US dollar strength again. It's a double-edged sword. As long as the peg remains, it's good for this region. You should always keep your mind open to depegging, whether or not it happens, just so that you know how you're dealing with the unimaginable. Next slide, please. So we talked about oil. My sense is it will be short term. OPEC yesterday decided not to cut production. They're trying to squeeze out the marginal players. In the past, marginal players were themselves, or Saudi would be the swing factor in the production, or Venezuela if they manage to cooperate. Now, the swing factor and the marginal production will be the US shale producers. Those US shale producers who are at 70 or 80 will be squeezed out, and it seems to be almost a deliberate OPEC strategy. So I would say there's a bit of a small war out there. Thankfully, this is not a war where we kill each other. This is a war where somebody is going to drive somebody else out of the market altogether. So watch that space keenly. That would clearly have implications. If the OPEC nations win that war, oil will bounce back closer to 100. If they lose that war, it could go to the 65, the 45, and all those numbers we do not want to think about. But I'll tell you, if you take a longer term cycle, the average price of oil over the last 50 years is still closer to the mid-40s rather than the hundreds that we see these days. So these things sometimes you have to also see on a longer term basis. And don't forget what's playing out in Russia and Ukraine, and depending on whether we have a cold winter in Europe or not could also impact oil almost immediately. There are some comments there as to what it would do to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the next slide, please, shows you what's going to happen in Bahrain, which is not a good story, because I think for Bahrain, they are already running a deficit and they would continue to face challenges if oil drops. So there's a kind of a double effect out there. You have all the economies uncertain, and the oil price, which is something that is keeping this region stable, and we heard about all the political stability issues, could be in for a test. So enough of the doomsday conversation. Perhaps I should move forward to something. This is even more depressing. Absolutely. And again, when I finished my CA, the good thing was there were no accounting standards. And then over the years, I realized that whatever we learned is meaningless because new standards keep coming every year. So I'll touch upon a few standards here. The intention, obviously, in this room is not to get into the technical debate, but what some of the challenges are that we would face. So with IFRS 9, although it impacts banks and financial institutions the most, there are parts of it that would impact non-banks as well, especially rules on hedging, potentially rules on impairment, although they have a carve-out for short-term receivables. And they spent a long time going round and round, and eventually for classification and measurement, I would say there's not much change. There is an equivalent to the held to maturity available for sale and fair value categories, although there are some options that restrict you now in terms of if you choose the fair value through other comprehensive income option, you will not be able to recycle. In the past, people used to tuck it to one side, recycle it in the future. So each of you before 2017 mandatory application needs to look at some of your investments to see whether you want to make those choices or not. For those of you who have not paid attention to the systems and processes in your organization, I would suggest now's the time to start doing it, because it will lead to a change in systems and processes to some extent, depending on what instruments you deal in, whether you're a bank or you're a non-bank. But broadly, the section on classification and measurement makes life easier. The difficult portions come in impairment and in hedging. For impairment, all those of us who are in banking were praying for a long time that the IFRS definition of expected losses and the regulatory definition of expected losses coming through Basel III should align so that, we are all lazy people. We just like to do it once. But as I said, for all the consultants out here, the good answer is no, we have to do it twice, because the definitions, although outwardly seem the same, when you peel the onion, what is a 12-month expected loss is different between the Basel regime and the accounting regime. How you then bring it together, how do you then take a reported capital and apply it in your regulatory returns and frameworks, there's a lot of dirty work to be done there. And given that these issues have long gestation period, Basel III won't come until 2019, IFRS 9 till 2017. Our life is going to continue to remain turbulent through all those years, and people are already talking about Basel 3.5, Basel 4, and so on. Also, there's a lot of hard work to be done. I know Sanjay said don't look at history, but unfortunately for impairment, you have to look at history. You need to look at history to determine probability of default, loss given default, and all those mathematicians will have a field day out here trying to help you calculate those, and how do you fit it into your respective in-house models. And these are not easy, I will tell you that. And then finally, for all of us, whether we are preparers, whether we are auditors, whether we are regulators, the disclosure requirements are going to be drastically different. And many of us do not pay attention to the level of detail that is required in these disclosures. And you need to set up, again, your systems, your internal data flows well in advance to be able to provide those disclosures. I can assure you, if you wake up in 2016 sometime, you think you have your accounting debits and credits sorted out, but you'll probably miss a step on your disclosures if you haven't taken that through your internal processes, discussions within the organization. The next slide then talks a little bit about hedging. This is a bit of a good news, especially for the corporates, because now you can use more instruments for hedging. You can hedge pools, net positions in pools if you want to, and the standard also aligns the accounting requirements with what you would be doing truly in your day-to-day life to achieve economic hedging. Whereas earlier we had accounting hedging, now it brings economic hedging and accounting hedging a lot closer together. The part that is difficult, which is macro hedging, doesn't really affect non-banks very much. It is a very complex area for banks as to how we would hedge non-interest rate sensitive, non-maturity balances, which in simple terms, cutting out the jargon, is current and savings accounts. And that's still a standard in the making, but the first part, I think some of you can take advantage of it. For those of you who want to take piecemeal advantage, you've missed that bus, because now the entire IFRS 9 has been issued, the classification, measurement, impairment, and hedging. So you need to take the whole thing in one go. You did have an option in the past to take one section, not move to the other section. The next slide talks about another important standard that will affect all of us. This too has deep implications on systems and processes, revenue recognition. While it hasn't dramatically modified what was there in IAS 18 and IAS 11, you get into now a contract-based recognition of revenue. And we have to ask ourselves, how many of us have systems that would recognize all those contract events, and how do we recognize it in our financial statements? I met a few people earlier from Betelco, and my heart goes out to anybody who's in a telecom company, a construction company, because all of you are going to have a tough time with IFRS 9. However, the good news is that this is one standard that cuts across all industries, it cuts across all entities, and in fact, there's a greater challenge for those of you who follow US GAAP, FASB, because they are going to align themselves with IFRS 9. So I think for the IFRS people themselves, for a few industries, it's going to be tough. For those who follow US GAAP, the whole thing is going to be a brand new ball game. Although it doesn't affect banks very much because the bulk of our earnings will be under IAS 39, IFRS 9, those of us who are in the credit department evaluating customer financials will now have to understand the new accounting rules to see how we can assess client financial statements, get a right understanding of their cash flows, of their P&L, and so on. Once again, although I've not mentioned it in the slide, there are detailed disclosure requirements on movements, etc., which is where I think all the hard work lies as well. A few other standards I'll touch upon. I'm not going to go through all the standards, but the next slide shows a few things that are happening. IFRS 10 on consolidation of standards. The standard has moved away in terms of the definition of the notion of control, and it's no longer just the percentage of shareholding. You could be in control of a company for accounting standards purposes with less than 50% shareholding. A lot of it really depends on your ability to vary the operating revenues of the target company. And again, there are a lot of tests that you need to watch out. It's a potential minefield where people did not consolidate before, you might end up consolidating, and vice versa. And it's also not the actual control you exercise, but it is the power to control, the ability. So even though you may not have appointed all the directors, even though you may not have called all the options you have, if you do have the power, the right, then you have to assess control. And lastly, and this is something interesting that just came up in the last few months, those of you who have subsidiaries, associates, joint ventures that are listed in a stock exchange and therefore has a level 1 price to it, you may be forced to value those at the level 1 price rather than under the current basis of equity accounting that you adopt. I don't have a slide on leases, but for those of you who are in that industry, don't worry, the standard has been discussed for the last 10 years. It will continue to be discussed for the next 10 years. Okay. Now we're done with the doomsday conversation, I think. We'll go to Basel III capital and liquidity. Show of hands, how many bankers in the room? Or how many people audit banks? Okay, so still we have about a third to a little bit more. So this is strictly for us. For the rest, I would say the only thing you need to know is if you are investing in banks, don't expect the same return you got pre-crisis, that you will be able to replicate that post-crisis. That, in summary, is all the next 5 or 6 slides are going to tell you about. This one diagram shows it all, and the one message you take away is life is going to get tougher for bankers. I've broken it up into a few slides so that you can see it in bigger font. So first we'll talk about capital requirements, which is the next slide. And the central banks, the Financial Stability Board, post-crisis have come up with rules as to how they would look at banks' capital. And they're setting minimum requirements for common equity. There were banks in the world that had less than 4% of common equity. They had all these hybrid instruments, which we realized during the crisis don't really provide the necessary backstop to protect the depositors or the economy. And there's a multi-layered approach as to how much you need at each level. And against your risk-weighted assets, you need a minimum of 8%. The story does not stop there, because we have the next slide that then shows you other requirements. These are some qualitative, some quantitative. The top right-hand corner shows what we call, you would hear the term SIFI. These are systemically important financial institutions. The regulator can impose additional capital requirements on the SIFIs. People talk in the range of 2.5%. So what's an 8% could become a minimum 10.5%. And then there's this whole debate about buffers and pro-cyclical and counter-cyclical movements between your earnings that flow through and how it affects your capital. And then a few regulators on the bottom left decided to throw the whole concept of models away because banks were using internal risk models to determine what their risk-weighted capitals were. And the regulators say, just give me a simple leverage ratio. You need to be able to match that 3% leverage ratio, otherwise I would believe you're a risky financial institution. All this put together means a higher level of capital, and all this means a lower level of earnings. For those of us who are within the industry who audit, the details go into thousands of pages, and the turbulence is really trying to understand it before the regulator changes the rules, and that's been happening quite often. The next slide pretty much touches upon some of these things that I said, and there is going to be a challenge to raise capital increasingly. And there are debates whether you should raise capital at the operating company level, the holding company level. There are different risk parameters, and just recently, because bail-in to protect the depositors is easier at a holding company level, in the past, people used to give a premium for that, now they go at a discount. So again, instruments that you thought were good for you in the past may not be good for you in the future as an investor. The next slide then talks about other regulatory changes, and this is the part where the fun begins for us finance people. Immense reporting requirements. My own bank's Pillar 3 disclosures run into some 30 pages. Banks like HSBC have much more. They are obviously global banks. Auditors have to audit it, and there's a lot of data governance that goes behind it, which means significant investment in systems. It's almost impossible to monitor the myriad complex interactions between regulations, real life. And then I'll touch upon the last point, moving away from capital. It is not just about capital, it is about liquidity. And although we heard from the earlier speakers there's plenty of liquidity, the challenge with liquidity is it short term, is it long term? And if we go back to our old days of the textbook, it was just about sources and uses of funds and the maturity profile of funds, which takes us to the next slide. And sorry, the next slide, please. Okay. That's okay. You can reboot, but shall I keep talking? So liquidity for banks, we are looking at the net stable fund ratio, which is more of a longer term ratio for banks to be able to manage protracted drawing on their own balance sheet. That's the net stable fund ratio. And then there's a liquidity coverage ratio, which is more of a short term ratio. That acronym there is high quality liquid assets. So these are cash and near cash elements. And how does it compare with the maximum net cumulative outflows you have over the next 30 days? And you have to try and balance both. It's easy to manage one, but as you manage one, you create a problem for the other and vice versa. So that's the job we have to manage on a day-to-day basis. Speaking more of liquidity, the next slide then shows you in a more schematic way all the things we need to do and how they interact at an operational level, at a tactical level, at a strategic level. What are the objectives we have? What are the tools we have? And the challenge, as I said, is not just one thing. If you need it to blend together and work in sync, you have to watch out. We also talked earlier about interest rates, and I can tell you one truth about banking. You can manage interest rate risk, you will create a liquidity risk. If you manage liquidity risk, you will create an interest rate risk. You can never manage both at the same time. So whether times are good or bad, at least as a banker, I live in turbulent times always. I think with that, I come to the end of my session, ready to take questions from the audience. Thank you.
I request the volunteers to collect the questions, please.
So this question says, will there be any option of GCC countries to accept depegging if oil prices go down, say, below 60? What is the factor that may lead to depegging? So I think the whole story of depegging, we could be talking here forever. It's a scenario that I asked you to plan for. There are many pegged currencies in the world, even outside the GCC. You have the Hong Kong dollar that's pegged. You have many other countries that have close pegs. My belief is you don't have to worry about pegging risk until oil itself is priced in a different currency. So when people start pricing oil in euros, then start worrying about a depegged risk. As long as oil is priced in dollars, that risk is quite minimal, I would say. Do you expect the US dollar to move within a narrow band, or will it be volatile? If I knew this answer, I'd be trading the dollar outside. But it's fair to say that as interest rate differentials open up, the dollar will be stronger relative to other currencies. That's what hurt the dollar leading into these last few years, where they were at zero interest rates. As they raise interest rates, they will be relatively stronger. That's the conventional view. But then convention has been proved wrong time to time. Please.
How do you manage liquidity mismatch? We have seen a couple of investment banks failing here in the Gulf to this mismatch. Your views, please.
Okay. So if you look at history, I would say more banks and more corporates have failed because they failed to manage liquidity. Very few banks have failed because they failed to manage credit risk, which is really the largest visible portion of the risk. For investment banks, the challenge was not so much of liquidity in terms of how they funded themselves. The challenge was they believed they would always have a ready exit to the assets they held, which they believed were liquid. And the crisis showed that those assets were either quite illiquid, or if you needed to get out of it in a hurry when there's a herd mentality. Imagine all of us try to get out of one door for lunch. We would never manage it. That was the challenge. I think it was banking 101. The investment banks thought prices would only go one way. The reality is prices go both ways.
Great. With that, we're done with the
Thank
question
you.
and answers. Thank you, C.A. Surya, for sharing your experience with us and preparing us to face the upcoming turbulences. I would like to request you now to pull the next raffle draw lucky winner for us.
Thank you. Am I allowed to do this?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. So I'm not looking, okay? Let's see whose name comes up. This is Vijendran Venkatasubbu from KPMG.
Congratulations for winning a hand blender.
Thank you. This is mine. Thank you.
I would like to call upon C.A. Money, a past chairman BCICI, to come up and present a token of appreciation to C.A. Surya.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, Khushbu. You need it next, right?
Could I now request C.A. Meenakshi Sundaram to please come on stage? And I would like to call upon Mr. Joel from Mercedes-Benz. Mr. Joel from Mercedes-Benz. Yeah. To honor Mercedes-Benz for their sponsorship with our international conference, Together Towards Tomorrow, CAs as Strategic Partners. Yes. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge the efforts put in by our young CA ladies and gentlemen over here who have been with us throughout this event and have been here on a Friday morning from 7:30 a.m. Let's give them a big round of applause for helping us out with this entire event. So friends, many of us have heard about corporate social responsibility. For most companies operating today in the global and multicultural world, it is not just a want, but a mandated need. Our next speaker today, who has mastered the science of managing us, yes, by us I mean people, is currently the Senior Manager of the Global Citizenship and Diversity at KPMG International. He will be sharing his views on CSR and its role in our tomorrow. Please put your hands together for Mr. Cal Subramaniam, who is here to share his views on Together Towards a Sustainable Tomorrow.
Thank you, Khushbu. Firstly, I need to start off by thanking BCICAI to the small typo error that they did. I think I've managed to keep this audience over here. No offense to you, Mr. Subramanian, because they all assumed. Yes, that's the next conspiracy I'm coming to. Because I think they all assumed that there was going to be a James Bond movie here. It said, "Tomorrow ever comes." Thank you. Now to the second conspiracy. It seems like they stuck both the Subramanians after lunch. So almost hoping that we can keep them awake. Before I can start off, and I'm looking for the clicker. Thank you. This is the third conspiracy, by the way. A clicker that doesn't work, so it gives me enough confidence to fiddle with something in my hand. Before I can start off, just a show of hands in terms of how many of you have heard of CSR or sustainability and I'm also going to take this one step further and say, can you shout out what you believe it is? Even the skeptics in the room, please, by all means. I've been called several things. Corporate hippie, tree huggers. Don't worry, I can take it. Anything that you've heard of CSR, what do you think CSR is? What does it mean? Okay. Okay. I'm not hearing expense. Why am I not hearing expense? I'm in the wrong room. Right, I'm going to start off with taking my face off the projector and let that sink. Unfortunately, I can't take any credit for that statement. It was a statement made by a good friend, Peter Barker, who's... Surprisingly, he was asked the same question, but he actually meant accountant. He made this statement in 2012 at the WBCSD. So Peter Barker is the president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And he made this statement at one of his conferences over there. And he had the same expression from people, saying, really, accountants? How? So he went on to explain by a little story that he said. So Peter Barker used to be the CEO of TNT, which is one of the world's biggest logistics company. He set up the first ever for-profit and UN partnership with the World Food Program, essentially using his entire logistics supply chain or his chain to be able to deliver food to the most toughest areas to reach in the world on behalf of development agencies. And a lot of people, including his CFO, told him he was mad when he set off on that journey. What they didn't see is by him making that one simple move, he realized where his competition didn't exist and the simplest areas for him to grow. Accountants have the capability to be able to put a value to anything, including the intangibles. You have the capability to measure. That's what this world right now needs. Right now, Mr. Subramanian mentions a lot of the crises. He was setting the scene for me. You were literally setting the scene for me. Ebola is one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now. Funnily enough, I was at a session where there was a US economist who essentially said Africa's economy is done because of Ebola. Really? Africa's economy is done? Africa has, as a continent, has some of the countries that are the closest to winding up their global debt. I don't see that anywhere else in the world. They have some of the fastest growing markets. The Chinese are investing in there for one main reason: returns. And something like Ebola, yes, is a challenge. Yes, it is a crisis. But it's because we are not managing it. And the minute, someone hears a crisis, we go the other way. We have a similar story, through CSR in our own, within KPMG. Unfortunately, we stopped calling it CSR in 2006 because of the image that CSR draws up. So CSR has this weird effect on people, which essentially means that you sign a check and you walk away, or you give money to a charity and your job is done, or you go and take a few photographs, introduce your people to a bunch of NGOs, volunteer for a couple of days, go paint a wall, and it's done. We moved away from that in 2006, simply because that's not the image we wanted to create in the developing world. What we do is essentially look at KPMG as a living entity in the world and within the communities that we operate within. To be responsible as an entity in the way we do business, in the way we make our profits, and also in making sure that we give our people what they want. Increasingly, we are hiring from, I'm losing track of, we started off with Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. Now, most people we hire are younger than, when I passed out of university. But these people don't want to know how many hours am I going to work for you, and then do I get home and how much money am I going to get. They want to know what else. So that's one of the biggest elements that we focus on as well. So one of the stories that I've come across is we do a project in the Bahamas with a hospital that's an NGO, essentially a community hospital, constantly looking for sponsorship, constantly looking for that handout. So the senior partner over there kind of requested us, saying, can we come in, have a look at the actual facility, gauge the value of our investment in this place, and see if it's worth the next sponsorship check. So my boss and I turn up, and before we kind of go in, my boss whispers something into the senior partner's ear and says, we'll do a tour of the place. We'll actually walk through the facility. The president of the hospital said, yeah, I'm sure we can even show you all our books, what we have, how much our expenditures are, what we're going through, to give you a better picture. So we said, fine, we'll do all of that. So our tour of the facility starts. The senior partner falls back, essentially about 10, 15 feet behind us, scribbling notes. And the president keeps turning around and looking back at him every now and again because he's not following with the group. And all of a sudden he disappears, he comes back out of another room, he's still scribbling notes. So we finished the tour about 2.5, 3 hours later at the president's office, and we get into a discussion with the senior partner, And then the boss tells the president, so I'll give you two options. You can either have the $50,000 check that you want, but that then means you're not coming back to us for another handout. That's it. That will be the last handout. We're not going to give you even $1 more. Or, alternatively, we can give you $40,000 saving year after year for the next 5 years. What do you think he went for? Surprisingly not. He actually went for the $40,000 savings. And he was more curious with that option, saying, you guys don't even know how this hospital runs. How can you give us $40,000 savings? But what it takes is for 4 hours for a senior partner to go back to his old senior associate days and run a stock take of the actual facility. What he was doing walking behind us was he was doing a physical stock take of the facility. So when we came into the president's room to look at all the books and all the expenses and everything, he was like, all these are unnecessary. They're not even using it. I counted them. They're still sitting there. They haven't used one of these supplies. They've got 5 beds that are doing nothing, and they want to spend money on setting up a new maternity ward. Why not use the 5 beds? You save money on that operation. So everything is a matter of measurement. Whether it's an investment, unfortunately for us, what we typically do is we're very, very good at measuring financial capital. And then we lose sight on social capital, natural capital, all of which, I don't need to tell you that it's significant in terms of the impact to a business. We experienced that. 2011, anyone in Bahrain will say that. Business came to a halt. Social capital, social issues. If I can go to the next slide, please. What we did in 2011 was essentially we drew up an entire list of all the possible risks that we would face as a business globally. And we ran a materiality impact on it. So we kind of said, if we don't understand this, how are we going to talk to our clients? How are we going to talk to our partners? How are we going to talk to our own people? So post doing a materiality impact on this, we kind of narrowed it down to 10 mega forces that essentially impact every business in this world, one way or the other. But along with being a risk, it's also an opportunity. So if you just look through some of that, Mr. Subramanian very kindly mentioned energy and fuel. Climate change, it's raining in Bahrain. If anyone says climate change does not exist, seriously, I grew up in this country. I remember hailstones in '84, which was the first signs of climate change, essentially. So, deforestation, we don't have a forest here to start off with. So, ecosystem decline, yes, we are seeing that. Food security. Fascinatingly enough, Qatar actually has a food security program, a heavily invested food security program. We met with the chairman about a year ago, and they're investing close to billions into this food security program to see how they can grow all the food that they need to sustain in Qatar. So we had one simple question to them. Why Qatar? If you invest half this money into other economies, you can grow the food that you need. I had the most fascinating answer back from the chairman of the food security program. He said the nearest terrain he can describe Qatar to is Mars. And if he can grow food in Qatar, it means he can give the solution away for free to developing economies. Fascinating. Who would have thought? spend that much money, that much amount of research, effort, only to give it away for free. We have water scarcity, which we all experience in this region, wealth, disparity, urbanization. Again, Middle East, post-Latin America is the fastest in terms of urbanization. We have a living example next door with UAE. Abu Dhabi is growing its own country. So these are all issues that directly impact businesses. Whether it's the lack of wealth, which is what 2011 essentially created for us, urban population. Qatar has the highest unemployed youth percentage, which sits at approximately 60% of people between the age group of 18 to 30 of nationals. And most of this is in every country's vision plan. They call it economic vision, but it again leads back to sustainability within the actual nation. Banks face this on a regular basis. There's a new sector called SMEs, which most banks who haven't really figured it out are still confused in terms of how they deal with it. But these are not just issues in terms of risks. There's also clear opportunities that come with it. And as with any opportunity, it comes to the people who adapt the quickest in most situations. In terms of risk, you can see the whole list over there. But unfortunately for me, although there's a list over there, they all still lead back to the third one, which is reputational. Anything goes wrong, of detail. ICAEW, whether it's CPAs, they all have their own little departments. Now there's accounting for sustainability, which is the Prince of Charles's little baby project that's running in the UK. Everyone's focusing on it. Schools have it within their educational system. Businesses are getting hit at it in every international forum that they go into. Maybe it's time that regulators took a stronger stance. In South Africa, if you're a public listed company, you have to produce a sustainability report. If not, you have to explain to some very, very difficult questions. The same goes with a lot more economies these days. This is now no longer a good to have. This is increasingly becoming a must have. You're seeing companies within this region that have international operations already producing GRI reports. You're seeing them produce UN Global Compact reports. There are some financial institutions in Abraj Capital does a UN PRI report, a Principles for Responsible Investment. This is something that's increasingly becoming important for two reasons. One, if you have any dealings with international markets, this talks about the level of transparency, the level of information you're willing to produce or give out. It's also becoming a mandate. So if there was a show of hands in terms of banks and investment banks, if your bank or your organization deals with IFC, this has to be within your framework. They require an ESG framework within your investments. So this is no longer, like I said, a good to have. Yes, the evolution of it is taking a bit longer in this part of the world, but eventually it'll get there. So we have two choices. Either we sit back, wait for it to get there, then draw you a deadline, and then panic, or actually start looking at this in terms of how does it actually provide you with business intelligence? Do you really know your business well enough? Are you taking into consideration the risks that are not traditional risks? If I can just move to the next slide, please. This is just some of the achievements. I'm not going to insult your intelligence in terms of reading it out for you. But this is just some of the information available in terms of the transitions that has been happening. So this isn't just an issue that organizations like ICAEW or CPA or anyone else have started pushing towards their members, but they've started scrutinizing themselves. They've been going through their own reporting process to be able to say, are we at risk in terms of non-financial information? Are we actually considering every element of this? Again, there's the issue of people over here saying, yeah, but I'll go back to India in 5 years. I'm here for about 5 years. You know, I've kind of missed the curve. If I can move to the next slide. Oh, you skipped one. That hit you before the 5 years. It's now mandatory. So anyone who has or works for an organization that has a net worth over 500 crores, any math whizzes here to translate that to Bahraini dinars? It's about 24, 25 million dinars, give or take. That's become mandatory now. It's not just mandatory in terms of reporting or actually setting aside a budget. You have to include it into your corporate governance. You have to have a committee in place, which includes senior leadership. You have to be looking at this, and you are expected to explain, should you not disperse these funds at the end of the year? India is one of the only countries that actually mandates this. Norway does a 25% kind of mandate, which essentially is an explain mechanism. But India is the only one that has a forceful mandate. And funnily enough, the forceful mandate's estimates is that they're looking at approximately 2.83 billion to be spent via development in India in the next year, just if they go with a minimal compliance. There are companies that do much, much higher. So the Tatas obviously do about 12%. Reddy's does about, I think it's anywhere between 8 and 13%, depending on the actual issue. But I think this is no longer, like I said, and I keep repeating myself over and over again, this is no longer a nice to have or a good to have. We have one company in Bahrain who does a GRI reporting, GPIC. And funnily enough, they do it because all their investment companies do it. So SABIC does it. PIC does it. And this is now becoming something that they can stay in compliance with them, because they obviously, being within the oil and gas sector, are a bit more tightly regulated. But let's not wait for regulation is my only point. Maybe it's something that will give you a stronger business edge. And if it is, I'm more than happy to chat. I've just stuck a last slide on there in terms of something that will give you some good reading. And this is again through the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is actually specifically focused on financial leaders and how it makes a difference in terms of their line of work. So should you need a copy of that, you'll have my mail contacts and my email IDs. I'm more than happy to send you a copy as well. Thank you. I have no idea where I was holding it. Okay.
Thank you, Cal, for enlightening us on such an integral part of corporate management. I'm sure we will all take back with us new aspects of CSR today. Any questions? The volunteers, could you please collect the questions?
Any questions, any comments? If you want to throw a water bottle at me, absolutely. Absolutely, that's why I'm asking for it. So I'll make sure it's recycled.
Okay, as Cal mentioned, his contact details are available, and I'm sure he's going to be with us for quite some time, so we can catch him then. I would now request Cal to pick out the next lucky winner for Diplomat dinner vouchers.
There you go. Mr. Srinivasan Rathinam.
CA Srinivasan. Next.
Do I get to keep all the cards I take?
Yeah.
We can do this all day long. Alba, Mr. C.P. Krishnan. Yes! Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now like to request CA Shaukat to present a token of appreciation from BCICI to Cal. Thank you, Cal. Thank you, CA Shaukat.
I've got a question. Hang on.
Oops.
Might as well. Ooh. I think this is a question for your auditors. A company invests lots in employees. How to present numbers in balance sheet? I'm going to go with weight. I'm going to go with weight. No, I think you do have an element of people capital in terms of everything that you spend on. We always, the most common line that you will hear is our people are our biggest asset. Your company valuation goes based on that. But when you actually measure non-financial metric, you have issues around turnover, you have issues around how many people you've hired, the gender diversity. You even measure the reasons as to why they leave you.
Actually, this is a challenge to fertility, how to measure it comparable. Let's say these two companies are there, this manpower is more valuable, other company is less valuable. They may be in same segment. How to put it in balance it?
You measure it based on productivity and how it turns out into your profit per employee. If you actually have, we do something, I come back again, I'm going to switch hats now, and I'm going to go back to my HR head. We do something called a cost of turnover, which is a calculation that's done in terms of how much you invest in your people, right from the point of whether it's recruitment costs, plus L&D costs, plus all your, productivity enhancement costs, everything. And then you actually add the elements in terms of if that person leaves you, you're going to end up spending that much more money by the time you find someone. So he or she reaches a productivity level, right? Whether it's 60% or 80%. No one ever reaches 100%. It's a myth. 80 is the max. So when they leave at that 80%, in the last 3 months that you have annoyed them, right? They are actually performing at 40%. So you have lost 40% in terms of productivity. After they've officially left you, it takes you about 6 months to replace them. Even if you replace them within a month, it takes the next person coming in about 6 months before they can reach the 80%. That is if you don't annoy them within the first 2 months. So, your cost of turnover measured by a difference of 100 dinars that they were asking for, that would have kept them in the job and kept your productivity levels high.
Thank you. Thank you, Cal, once again. I would now request Vanessa from ICAEW to share a few words with us on the course of ICAEW and its benefits to us as CAs.
Is that on? Testing, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Vanessa Hayward, and I'm here today representing the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, the ICAEW. I'm very pleased to be here with you this weekend, and I'd just like to thank, first of all, Meenakshi for very kindly inviting me to participate. I'm pleased to have a couple of minutes just to address you very briefly. For those of you who don't know ICAEW, we are a professional accountancy body. We're a professional membership organisation supporting about 140,000 members worldwide. ICAEW does have a memorandum of understanding with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which provides a pathway to ICAEW membership for members of your esteemed organisation. Many of you might think, well, why on earth would I want to do that? I'm already a chartered accountant. I have a world-leading chartered accountancy qualification already. Well, those who have done it, really it's about three things. They see that it's about global recognition of the ICAEW brand, global recognition of ICAEW chartered accountants as experts in business. If you look at FTSE 100 companies, for instance, 83% of FTSE 100 companies have an ICAEW member on their board. 97% of the best-known global brands in the world have an ICAEW member working for them. But it's not just about global recognition, it's also about an enormous array of resources that we provide to our members on an ongoing basis throughout your career. It's about technical guidance and resources, and also things like technical helplines to support you with professional issues throughout your career. And then finally, I think it's about being part of an ICAEW member community and the professional networking opportunities that that provides to you. So those are the reasons why some members of your organisation do decide to join us. It'll be of interest to some of you, maybe not to others. But for those of you who are interested, there's one message that I do want to get across to you today, which is at the current time, there is an opportunity for you, if you have more than 2 years of post-qualification experience, to join ICAEW with just one exam, our final case study exam. So that arrangement will be in place until July 2015. After that, things will change, and the route to membership will require 3 exams. So all I would say is that if this is something of interest to you, do come and have a chat to me. Let me talk you through the process, and it might be something that you'd want to consider sooner rather than later. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Vanessa. I would now like to request CA Meenakshi Sundaram to please come on stage and present ICAEW with a memento of appreciation for their sponsorship for the event. Before we break for coffee, I have a small announcement for you. We have a stall outside from one of our sponsors, Expat Properties, which are giving away a pearl necklace today. Please visit their stall and drop in your cards because the draw would be held today at 4:30 p.m. So the time right now is 3:05. We come back and reconvene the session in 15 minutes at 3:20. Once again, after the coffee break, there would be a draw, and only those who are present in the auditorium would be eligible for this draw. So take your break and come back soon.
Maybe assemble back, please. Sorry, Nilesh. I know. And I know you're not covered in the indemnity as well. Friends, may we assemble please fast. Mr. George, I see you. Yeah, I know. He's there. I already ensured. Welcome back, friends. All set for another exciting raffle. Let me introduce myself. I am CA Amit Shinoy, member of the Executive Committee of BCICI. May I invite CA George Isaac, Chairman Doha Branch, to pick up the raffle, please. Mr. Avinash Fadnis. Friends, once I asked CA Khushbu, what kind of bank does she like? She said, Amit, it's very simple. I like a bank which gives me a loan and then leaves me alone. I'm sure the next gentleman who is going to rock on the stage would not like to have a customer like Khushbu. Do you know, friends, this gentleman has banking experience more than my age. The man with the Midas touch, who is known to change fortunes of banks like Bank of Baroda, Union Bank to gold. Ladies and gentlemen, here I present to you Chairman and Managing Director of Union Bank of India, Mr. Arun Tiwari, who's going to help us to understand organic growth, the future of banks. Organic growth, the future of bank, Mr. Arun Tiwari.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I got the two shocks right in the beginning. First thing, Mr. Amit Shinoy said that we all have gathered here for the raffle, not for anything else. As if. Number one and number two, he made me to look like as if I'm too old. He said my experience is more than his age. Thank you anyway. I take that as a compliment. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to me to be here this afternoon in Bahrain. Pleasure. Why? Because I got to know, I have been here for a few hours and I'll be leaving in a few hours from now. I thought the Bahrain is only oil. But I got to know it's not just the oil, it's tourism. And to a person like me, a banker, hardcore banker, it's about banking as well. Therefore, it has become more interesting to me this afternoon to talk to you. I speak from my experience. So I don't have, I'm sorry, any PPTs. If that disappoints you, I'm sorry, but talk. And I would like what I told Mr. Shinoy was it's more Q&A of it. At our stage, what happens normally whenever something you have to speak about, you have got a secretariat, they'll prepare something for you, they'll give some pages which you read on the flight when you land in here. Half of it is crap, so you strike it off, and ultimately you speak from your heart and your experience. Nonetheless, whatever they have done, a bit of it is correct also. But I must compliment the Bahrain chapter of ICAI because time could have not been more relevant for this kind of theme, which is together towards tomorrow, CAs as a strategic partner. And when we say strategic partner in the age of uncertainty and with the class of which I represent of the bankers, there cannot be a more strategic partnership than the CPAs or chartered accountants. So I'm too pleased here this afternoon to be here with you. I also take this opportunity to express my thanks and wishes to the strategic partnership that our great diaspora has had, because I just read about 30%, 35% is Indian diaspora out of Bahrain, and will have, with the resident Indians in realizing a billion-plus dreams of collective prosperity, leadership in the comity of nations. It's a matter of pride and satisfaction for us. Professional accountants have played a seminal role in society's long march to the prosperity. The history is replete with the examples of many. Investors, creditors, employees, other stakeholders, and the public at large rely on professional accountants for sound financial accounting and reporting, effective financial management, and competent advice on variety of business and taxation matters. And most importantly, of late, corporate governance is naturally strengthened by having accountants as the member of the directors on the board. The attitude and behavior of professional accountants in providing such services have an impact on the economic well-being of their community and the country, whether it's Bahrain or back in India. Before I dwell upon the topic, organic growth, future of banks, let me quickly give you a roundup on Indian economy, current state and the prospects. Let me give me one. There was a confusion until this morning. I got two emails. One was that I have to speak here about the Indian economy and Indian banking, and then when I saw in the brochure, it was something different. So cut paste. I can see a sense of curiosity here to know if the things are taking a turn for better ever since the last election, which were held in the May 2014, and the new government, NDA, came in with a thumping majority. So before I get into the long-run story for the economy and banking sector in particular, it will be better if I may quickly apprise you of the current state of India's macros and the gains made in last 1 year. If you recall, the state of economy a year ago, the gyrations in the Indian rupee exchange rate, as also the responses by the policymakers, you will be surprised that in last 1 year or so, we have traveled a lot of distance. And if I quickly talk about the data, the growth rebounded strongly in the first quarter of fiscal 2014-15. It rose to 5.7% from 4.7% a year back. Inflation has moderated from double digit to 5.5% YOY as of October 2014. Exports have been resilient despite the rest of the world battling the risks to deflation, particularly the Euro area or Japan, and now even China. The current account deficit stood at 1.7% of GDP for the quarter ended June 2014. The fiscal deficit of the central government outperformed the target of in the second consecutive year in 2013-14. It came to 4.6% of GDP, that is 0.2% of GDP better than what they had targeted themselves. Rupee has been stable and has been range bound 60-62, giving comforts on dynamic sale and purchase of decision making. Contrasted with the current state of currencies of other emerging markets, whether we talk about Russian ruble, which has fallen approximately 30% against the US dollar, the currencies of other big emerging markets, like whether we talk about Brazil, Turkey, or South Africa, they have also fallen quite substantially. Meanwhile, back in India, pace of reforms has gained momentum. The new government has focused on efficient and effective implementation with sense of urgency. I representing a public sector bank, I have to touch base with them day in and day out, and you can feel that sense of urgency. New reform steps include actions to deregulate diesel prices, enhance FDI limits in key sectors including defense and railways, reform labor laws, facilitate regulatory compliance, simplify land acquisition and environmental clearances, which was the wall. I don't know how much of you are aware, we have had, and we still have some of the laws back in India of 1934, it's in the state of Tamil Nadu, which says even after the permissions from the government, you set up your factory in the forest land, you need to have snake trappers around your boundary wall. So that constructive destruction, in real sense of it, has started. I mean, I read this morning on my flight into Bahrain that in one go, nationals of 43 countries have been given that visa on arrival status. We were talking this for a long time. So that is what I am saying, sense of urgency. The pace of reforms, as I said, in different areas, they have really got momentum, and they are being simplified. And the Prime Minister has said many number of times. And the way they are trying to work this time around is, it may be politically incorrect, but let me speak when I'm speaking from my heart. Many times we read, these many IAS officers have been transferred back in India. It's very simple. If they're set of 5, they are called there. Even Prime Minister engages with them directly and then takes a call. If Arun Tiwari was one of them, whether I was prepared fully for this meeting or not. So I'm writing as an IAS officer my destiny, what will be next. So either deliver or you will be lost in the oblivion. And it is happening time and again in quick succession, which I see the right kind of people are being put at the right place. I'm not competent to comment on that, but it's a statement of fact. While India makes story more interesting in the divergent impact of the global macros, what has roiled the other emerging markets has in some ways been beneficial to India. Number one is the US dollar strengthening, which has been buoyed by a resilient American economy and prospect of interest rate increases by US Federal Reserve. India's bond markets, with their restricted access for foreigners, are less vulnerable to reversal of financial flows than peer emerging markets. As a matter of fact, if we see, foreign investors, the Reserve Bank says you can't be investing in less than for 1 year. Earlier on, it was short term and they were making the upheavals in the market. So to begin with, they have started with a 1 year period. Slowdown in China, which has cast negatives on the demand outlook for commodity exports. China, however, accounts for mere 5% of India's export basket, thus limiting any spillover risk to India. Aggressive stimulus in Japan, which to some extent could offset the weakening of US flows to India and via the currency. Stagnation in the Eurozone, which has been there for quite some time, would hurt Europe's trading partners in Turkey and Russia more than far away. High savings and investment rates and youthful demography, rising urbanization, aspirational citizenry, budding entrepreneurship, financial inclusion efforts, sizable middle class, supporting domestic demand, etc. Together, these trends give India an edge over the peer developing economies in the long run and medium term both. Now coming to organic growth future of the bank. You may recall that robust financial institutions helped India with the way it was being regulated back in India by Reserve Bank of India. You also have, there was a regulatory body for financial institutions. But 2008, a lot of things happened around the globe for banks and financial institutions, but it didn't touch in as much as the FIs or banks are concerned back in India because of the prescriptive regulation. We were preemptive. Therefore, we could collectively weather the uncertainties of 2008. Indian banks withstood the shock very well and remained stable in the post-crisis period. On the metrics of such as growth, profitability, capital strength, and asset quality, Indian banks are now comparable with the banks in the region. But what next? Is the question, where are we headed in the future? To answer this, let me first outline the general setting that our banks are placed in and from which they have to leap forward. As you may be aware, in current cycle of growth slowdown, Indian banking sector has witnessed shrinking loan opportunities, asset quality strains, rising cost of funds, with difficulties in raising low-cost deposit, weaker pricing power, and enhanced capital requirement under Basel III norms. In current challenges, if current challenges are seen in the larger macro context, in my view, our banks have responded fairly so far. The greater challenges for the Indian banking industry, however, remains in turning the tide and exploiting the opportunities lying ahead. Development experience across the world points that there come accompanied changes in social, political, economic life of a nation as it gradually moves into a higher income category. One witnesses the changing composition of income and expenditure basket of households as well as the corporate. Along the journey, demand for banking and financial services also changes accordingly. It has happened in Japan, Southeast Asia, in China, and in many other countries. It is only natural to expect this happening in India as well. Let's do a thought experiment. Take a longer horizon of 2 decades and see what growth our banks should aspire for. If India could mere emulate, if not excel, what she has achieved in last 2 decades, India could be a $10 trillion sized economy by the year 2034. And by the way, Indian economy has grown 6-fold in last 2 decades from 0.3 trillion in 1994 to $1.85 trillion today. What should be size of banking sector for serving $10 trillion economy? Even by conservative estimates, the bank credit to GDP ratio of commensurate economy should be 125% if not more. Presently, bank credit to GDP ratio for USA is 198%, Japan it's 189%, UK it's 165%, China is 140%. Therefore, for India, this ratio is around just 53%. That is, outstanding bank credit today is around $1 trillion. If you work out the numbers, the aspirational real growth for our banking aggregate should be no less than 13.5%, and add to that 5 to 6% inflation rate, you have an aspirational nominal growth for bank credit of around 18 to 20% in next 2 decades. What does it mean for our banking system? Do we have enough banks among us to cater to the needs of economy? Do we have the scale and variety to serve the varied nature of the need of economy? We must question our existing banking structure in terms of size, capacity, ability to meet divergent credit and banking service needs, access and inclusiveness. As you're aware, in present banking structure, 44 foreign banks in India presently account for 6.5% of banking assets, while 27% public sector banks account for 71% of total assets. The rest is made up by other private sector banks. We also have regional rural banks, cooperative banks, but their contribution is near insignificant. Much of Indian population is still outside formal financial sector. The Reserve Bank of India has recently granted licenses to 2 private companies or bodies. Several other would join. There is the thought process for which white paper is out for differentiated licensing or niche banking, which they are talking about the payment banks. The common objective of furnishing financial inclusion in the whole gamut of things. As the population of needing basic financial services increases and more opportunities unfold, more entities would like to establish their presence. Having said that, there will be no let-up in the responsibility for banks and public sector in the period envisaged, given their dominant share in the present banking assets. If the experience of the last 2 decades is any guide, the public sector bank could still be accounting for majority share of the banking what we are envisaging by 2034. But there is a serious constraint for them in terms of staying capitalized, enough to meet the growth imperatives, which we said about 80 to 20% in the next 2 decades, for an aspirational 10 trillion economy. The rough estimates are that public sector banks alone may need about $40 billion to be Basel III compliant by 2019, when the norms become fully operative. Even allowing that part of it will come through government support, the bulk has to come through internal accruals. More importantly, to sustain 20% growth for 2 decades, the banks have to plow back profit And if they have to plow that profit to that level to meet that capital requirement, the return on the asset has got to be minimum at 1%. Clearly, therefore, the way forward has to be organic growth. More so, if we look globally wherever, is there inclusiveness in the banking system? Right, start from the United States of America up to Japan. In between, we are countries like Bahrain is there, and I'll talk from the perspective more of Indian standpoint of view. While we need to prepare for the next 2 decades, as I have outset before, I shall lay out 5 broad areas where I see opportunities for banking and finance industry in India for next 5 years. And these are retail, with rising mortgage loan opportunities, which may be housing loan, which may be personal loan, which may be education loan. SMEs, which is the backbone of any country, with cluster-based approach. That is where the Make in India initiative, which has been started off by Government of India, would take its shape from. Infrastructure, as would have been would have the stronger impact on the longer perspective of the economy. Trade, inland as also external. After all, where trade leads, finance follows. And finally, agriculture, with inclusive push to developmental policy. There will be rather a steep surge in demand for financial services in case of India, given the active push for financial inclusion under Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana. Since August 28, 2014, the date when the Prime Minister launched the scheme, banks have opened 79 million new customer accounts with 62 billion balance resting in these accounts. Just think of, it's been what, 2.5 months. We, same set of public sector bank or banks in general back in India, when we were asked to cover that entire India should be covered by March 2016, we were very skeptical about ourselves. But when in a mission mode it was required to be done, it is done, and not that when we say it's a zero balance account, it's called zero balance account, but it's not really zero balance account. Therefore, I'm giving you the number of balance which is lying in this newly opened 79 million accounts, which is 62 billion rupees in the balance, which was not in productive sector. The increased banking penetration should help bank have steady access to the low-cost liabilities. These all are low-cost liabilities. And with this, more importantly, when we talk in the Indian context, bottom of the pyramid, every country has the bottom of the pyramid. Even the developed economies, whether you talk about the Europe, Euro area, or United States, you have that bottom of the pyramid. Unless otherwise that is taken care of, there cannot be in real terms the real organic growth. And when I talk about these accounts and 62 billion deposited in them, they are 4% rate of interest, number one. Number two, with this comes microfinance. With that comes microinsurance. With that comes micro remittance. So look at the volume of the business. In fact, when the entire India is covered, are we really, at times I think or forced to think, that are we really geared up to give that kind of service to that kind of population, that number of population? Or IT, therefore, has been the bedrock of public sector bank back in India. If economic reforms have to unleash at a faster productivity, with a faster productivity growth, the economy, to put it on the high growth path on a sustainable basis, reforms are needed. And again, let me tell you, because I for one have to interact with the different industry. It may be large corporate, it may be a small industry, it may be a small borrower. The winds of change you can feel everywhere, that you are being made accountable now. The government on its part is prioritizing to remove the infrastructure bottlenecks, easing limits on trade and investment, implementing reforms to education, labor, product markets, and government service delivery. It would be assisted by India's long-term fundamentals that still stay robust. And let me tell you, many times we are written off. But since you all have some roots or roots back in India, to me, not these GDP numbers. Till such time back in India, FMCG sector is doing good. India's story is intact. You ask ITCs of the world, where from their most of the revenue comes. It's not from the metro towns. It's from the tier 6, tier 5 towns. And if that story is intact, people have got the purchasing power. We have got, I take pride in representing a bank from India. Friends, as India readies itself to next great leap, to become 10 trillion economy, there will be opportunities abound for all. However, to give India a definitive edge in evolving world setup, we should also be willing to shoulder responsibilities. Banking sector, of which public sector bank is a major constituent, has to take greater responsibility to ensure India does not lose her way for want of funds. Each of us has a role and responsibility to make India a vibrant place to live and do business. I'm confident that together with the Bahrain chapter of ICAI here, we shall together prevail through present challenges. I wish this conference all success. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ready.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun Tiwari, for that quite an insightful update about India and what's happening. We have a couple of very interesting questions. One very interesting question which has come my hand is, what changes are banks, especially nationalized bank, making to become more competitive? You want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. Give me this
Sure.
so that I'm in completeness. Ultimately, as a banker or you as a chartered accountant, we understand only one language of numbers. Is that right or not? The differentiator has been, when you said the nationalized bank, the level playing field has been the problem. I don't know how much of you know about, there is something called 10 rupees ka postal order, 10 rupees postal order. Right? RTI. It's good to be transparent. But that RTI applies only to public sector banks. Though two C's, important C's, CBI and CVC, applies only to public sector banks. So many a number, I'm not being defensive, I've given a long answer to this, because it's a painful point for me also, that we are asked, not being given the same level playing field. Let me talk from your perspective, because I like brutally frank questions and I like to answer them brutally, but frankly, and let that be brutally frank. I as a customer, I'll go to a public sector bank because 500 rupees is the minimum deposit amount. I'll deposit that. Next door it's a private sector bank. Minimum is 10,000 rupees. The day that 10,000 becomes 9,999, they will deduct 500 rupees for not maintaining, and maybe they'll issue a certified check, again deducting some money for that and send it to your home. Thank you so very much, we can't afford. Whereas, same gentleman, Arun Tiwari, he has the account with a minimum 500 rupees, will issue a check of 600 rupees. It's a statement of facts, painful. 600 rupees. Why could you not have phoned me up? You have my mobile number that I have to deposit 100 rupees in the bank account. That is the differentiator. It's a fact. You deal with the bank. You gentlemen, you deal with the bank. But this is the fact. Despite that, and one more thing is about the fine print. We never promise sun, moon, star. But we try to deliver what we promise. Let's not take the names. But most of the cases back in India, if you travel, or your families if they are there, you deal with a direct selling agent, not with the banker. So if tomorrow there is a problem, go to the bank, you would say, whom did you deal with? It was not the bank. Where would you go? Another example. There's a number, if you have got a problem, your call will be forwarded so many number of times that out of whatever you call that, you will bang the phone. Now coming to more competitive. Now who this gentleman asked, what is competition? What competition we are talking about? Sir, private sector bank. Let me tell you, and you have to trust me on this. Once I was posted in Pune, it was quite a few years back. The Commissioner of Police, Pune, A.N. Roy, who happened to become the Commissioner of Police of Bombay also, he had account with my bank. And later on he said, Mr. Tiwari, I am getting better rate of interest from this bank. It's a private sector bank. Can I switch over? I said, sir, choice is yours. But when we hold hand, वो जो 7 चक्कर लगाते हैं हम लोग, once in a lifetime, under that act. So if you have decided that you have to switch. So this DSA came to me कि Roy साहब ने बोला है सर वो papers आपसे लेने हैं, ये उनका check है. I asked this person who has conversed account of a literate person, Commissioner of Police of Pune, कि अगर तुमको ये लोन लेना होगा तो तुम कहाँ से लोगे? He said, beep, I'll not take the name of the bank. Sir, इस बैंक से नहीं लूंगा जिसके लिए मैं काम कर रहा हूँ. And that is what actually happens. I'm not trying to be too critical about, but the fact is, you maintain accounts or competitiveness. We are incompetent in recovering money from the customer. And trust me, I'm not being sarcastic. You have a credit card, you have, say, a personal loan, and you have got a home loan from the same private sector bank or a foreign bank. You default on one. It is cross default, number one. Number two, poor public sector banks, if your EMI is, say, to be given to the bank on 5th of the month, right? If it is given on 6th of the month, it's 1 day, 2% more rate of interest for 1 day. You default there, it will be for full 1 month. Check it out, sir, your accounts. So we are less competitive in recovering our dues. Nobody says no, but sir, the fact remains. This letter will go to Prime Minister of India, Governor, Reserve Bank of India, CVC, CBI. Trust me, I receive minimum 20 such letters going everywhere, and then every government department asking me. Answer, it doesn't happen there. So level playing field. Coming back to the numbers, if still 72% of the Indian assets are being, and where real India resides, sir, not in Bombay and Pune and Ahmedabad. Dare to go there and do business. Then I'll call competition. I think I have answered a little longer.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun. Another interesting question for which I'm sure we'll have equally interesting answer is, looking at Kingfisher's story, how serious do you think NPA issue is going to become going forward? PSU bank hold 90% of NPA at 5%. Do you think NPA meltdown could trigger a banking crisis?
King of good times. I have no exposure. No, let me be fair in answering this. You must have read recently the two airlines, Jet, they have got the two sets, Jetlight and Jet Airways, they are also merging. One of the reasons, I'm not an aviation expert, but one of the reasons, same management cannot run full fare airline and budget airline. It's a different mindset, absolutely different mindset. And as a banker, and when you have put in more than his age in the banking sector, you have got that knack which is very inbuilt. My qualification is MSc Chemistry and I have become banker. और पता नहीं क्यों आदत है, whenever I open a balance sheet, I open it from the back. I don't know why. Because those numbers, I'm sorry, I don't know whether I should be speaking from this platform, but we also know, sirs, we respect each other's profession, but many number of times it's backward calculation. It's a fact. It's backward calculation. So coming back to this, your NPA thing, I can give you number of my bank. And I'll not talk about NPA, I'll talk about the stressed asset, which includes restructured portfolio also. 65% of my stressed asset comprises of discoms and stalled projects. Knock that off. What is left? Nothing. No industry is bad. It's the cash flow issue. It's the cash flow issue. Now that I read out intelligently somewhere that GDP, fiscal deficit number. Now somehow last financial year that magical figure of 4.2 came, fiscal deficit. To restrict it that number, government did not release the payments amounting to 1 lakh crores. Now you all deal with the different companies also. You work for the companies also. Receivables should be of 30 days, they become of 60 days to 90 days to 120 days to 150 days to 180 days and whatever. What I'm trying to bring home my point is no industry is bad. It's the cash flow issue. So, and it has to be triggered or kick-start from somewhere. Government of India in last 8 months, I will not say that the new government only, even it had started before also. It has got impetus, it has got some wings now, it's faster, fast-paced. And India is a country of 1.25 billion jumbo. And any jumbo aircraft has to be on a runway for a longer time before it takes off. We all know. It's not helicopter or chopper, vertical takeoff straight up. No, not possible. Therefore, once these clearances which have been given, it will take about 6 to 9 months. So my firm take is Q4 of this financial year will see a rebound of the growth. And I can see that. So I'm not worried about. When I gave you 60, as a matter of fact, to be correct, 66% is discoms or stall projects.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun. Now, something of interest to all us NRIs. Do you see interest rates in India going up or down in the next 12 months? For an NRI, is it better to invest in FCNR deposits?
Oh, it's interesting for me also. I would have loved if there is a question on the interest rates on lending also, so that I could correlate the two. Look, I mean, you all know, for me, your deposit is the raw material. Who has asked this question? Sir, let's assumption based. You are an entrepreneur, you want a bank loan also. And you have got personal savings, you will put that in the bank as well. To me, as a banker, my raw material is your money. Now, on your money, you would like to have 9%, 8%, 10%. I'm talking about the rupee deposit, resident rupee deposit. You add to that what I have, my preemptive CRR, SLR, 26% gone. My operating cost, if you have bought my share, you will ask, sab return kya hai? Is that right or not? And then my base rate for lending is 10 and a quarter. Where do I go? Where do I go? Where do I go? We have the answer, sir. So going forward, inflation, if it is coming down, no, it's all linked, sir. That's all arithmetic. If inflation is going down, which is really going down, and I'll start from the other end of it. The lending part of it, because there is always a time lag. Lending का rate उसी दिन से कम हो जाता है. If you are locked in your money for 3 years or 2 years, 1 year, I will continue to pay at that rate. So that time lag will be there. Therefore, going forward, lending rates would come down from next quarter. December, nothing is going to happen. People say governor will do something or other. No, my take is governor is governor, he can decide whatever he wants to. But the fact remains, there should be sustainability in the numbers. Otherwise, having reduced it once, then increased it again, it is counterproductive, number one. And reduction of 25 basis point doesn't make any sense. Minimum should be 50 basis point reduction. And that is where it will have its effect.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun Tiwari. In the interest of time, we'll just restrict our questions here, and sir is available for any further questions to be taken. Let's now open our box of surprises. So who is going to get it? I hope some interest rate socks doesn't come out.
Till such time your surprises are not shocking, it's welcome.
Might be interest rate stops jump up. So raffle.
Oh. Oh. Havelock. Madhusudan Chari. Not there. I'll take it.
You can just go on.
Right. I think I'm going to go have more opportunities today. Arabic. RCSI Bhavana Muthu. Oh. But tell me one thing. If any lady got a raffle prize since this morning,
No, she's the first.
you must thank me also. And all yours. And useful too. Good.
CA Bhuna Muttu. May I now request our tall, fair and handsome Mr. Nath, partner BDO, to honor our guest speaker, Mr. Arun Tiwari.
Hi. Pleasure so much. Pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you so much. Pleasure. Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Same here.
We'll have a short video from our one of our sponsors, Nimai. Members can definitely visit this stall and take more information. Quite exciting services being provided by Nimai. Yeah, that's already. Friends, tomorrow is a pretty interesting topic, right? Come on, friends. At least let me get some response. Yes, thank you. About tomorrow, I can just say one thing. Don't worry if it is end of world tomorrow, because it's already tomorrow in Australia.
Sorry.
All of us practice corporate governance daily, but might be not in its entirety. To provide the right sheen to the practice of corporate governance, we have a guru today who is going to present us the roadmap for tomorrow for our smooth travel to our coveted destinations. Mr. Arshad Gadit holds the respectable position of partner, assurance and business advisory with BDO, the man with a magic wand. Mr. Arshad Gadit will lead us through the roadmap for tomorrow, corporate governance. Corporate governance roadmap for tomorrow by one and only Mr. Arshad Gadit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amir. Thank you. This was a very elaborate kind of introduction, and this is the man I am. By the way, this is not my twin brother. I have evolved into a much older man in 3 months. But thank you very much for this honor, and I'm privileged to be here. This is a topic which is very close to my heart, and I always wanted to address to this forum. I had an opportunity last time, but unfortunately, due to some personal reasons, I had to drop out. My fellow colleague Bipin Shetty actually given a very insightful presentation I heard last time in my absence, and hopefully I can fill his shoes by taking yet another very, very exciting topic which is very close to my heart. It's corporate governance and how the corporate governance has evolved so far, and how the future is going to be for corporate governance. There is a lot more to be discussed about it, and I will just give you a flair of what I'm going to be talking about. I'll give you an overview, just a history. We all like history as accountants. We'll give you what the definition is, where it all started, I'll also talk to you about what the regulator and the local authorities, not just in the region, across the world, has been doing in developing corporate governance code. And then moving on from there, how the market is composed and what are the challenges for the market, and how you as finance professionals can play a significant role in developing the real corporate governance and implementing that. I'm a firm believer that there's a lot of work has been done. If the whole corporate governance idea is distilled properly and implemented properly, it can reap rewards for organizations. And moving on from there, we will also talk about integrated reporting, which is around the corner for us. And then I'll try to sort of come up with some next steps for you, which will lead into what you can do as individuals in corporate governance. I would not ask the question of corporate governance. I think you would all know what corporate governance is. There's a lot of definitions about corporate governance. This has been understood in different shapes and forms by different people. What is really corporate governance? In this part of the world, sometimes it might feel it's a bit of a light touch corporate governance. I will talk about that, but what's the definition? And it sums it up in this very nice small definition. Corporate governance is a system in which the business and corporations are controlled. There's a much more wider definition of it. But what corporate governance does is actually breaks the silos, trying to give responsibilities to the managers, to the stakeholders, to the suppliers. It just defines the overall framework of running the operation of the organization. And it also sets the objectives of the organization so they can be monitored, whether they have been achieved and whether they have attained the desired results. The evolution has started. We have been discussing in previous presentations that the crisis were the biggest opportunity for change. The whole thing started from Wall Street crisis in 1929. Changing the role of modern society has happened from there. And things have evolved from World War II. Different roles and responsibilities were made more clearer. In 1980, and after Jensen principle and agent mechanism was also emerged. There was a lot of CEO dismissals in 1990s. The East Asia crisis of property. This has all led into thinking that there is a framework which is required, and the first actual effort in putting this as a whole framework was done by Cadbury report, which came out in 2000, and along with that SOX was also around the corner in 2002, which has given a broader framework of corporate governance, and they came up with 4 or 5 principles. What GCC has then done, they have followed the trail. In the last 50 years, this particular region has grown exponentially because of the oil foundation, and then further from there, how the organization had to catch up with their overall corporate governance model. So what UAE and Bahrain has been doing, and there are other regional players who have done a lot of work, they have established a commercial law in 1984. Then Hukama was created in UAE, was talking just about creation of the framework for corporate governance. And then another DIFC body was created, Modara, which was talking about the board effectiveness and the relevance of the capabilities and capacity of the directors. And in 2011, in fact, the S&P index, along with Hukama, was established, whereby the social responsibility and corporate governance effectiveness was measured. Although it has slight impact on the actual value of the traded shares, but it did work out to be building more confidence for the foreign direct investment. Bahrain has not left behind. MOIC and CBB has done a lot of work together along with the National Corporate Governance Committee to develop a sound corporate governance model, and that has, with the 25 nations already developed their corporate governance, they had sort of taken snippets from them and what will work attuned to the region. and what would work for this region, has established 9 principles and what they call it explain and comply principles. So I would not go into all the principles of the code, and I will actually bring things to life for you in the next slide, where you can actually see where do you sit in the composition of the entities you are working with. So you can work it out what are the challenges and how can you overcome or help the organization overcome these challenges of effective corporate governance. But a couple of things which I will share from my own experience in this part of the world. The effectiveness of the board, an informed board, is a fundamental foundation of real corporate governance. I worked in London for 8 years, and in fact I was in the building when one of the major investment bank was being announced completely gone into liquidation. And I saw it with my own eyes that what has gone wrong. The Western world was geared up for it. They have all the corporate governance rules implemented. Still, it didn't work. And I had a feel that there is a reason behind it. And that was the main reason, effective and informed board. There is a culture that we know. The board directors thinks that it's too much for our ego for me to tell anybody that I don't know what you're telling me. That has repercussions on the organizations. I have seen organizations talking about things, for example, putting the money in subprime market because everybody was making money. I would also make money if I were to put that without thinking about the downside. And that has led into significant problems and issues. And I had been a party to a lot of bigger organizations where I sat in the board and I saw the chairman or the CEO was taking one-sided decisions and nobody was prepared to challenge. So there was a mechanism, but it was not fully in its real sense was implemented. In fact, Western world has now moved on to a much broader corporate governance model, and I don't know whether it will work or not, but on paper it looks good. Like for example, a CRO would be allowed a veto power against the CEO's decision. Now this is taking it to an extreme level. In this part of the world, if I were to try and implement that will have a significant and huge, it's more of an emotional attachment of an organization of family-owned businesses in this part of the world. But this code is very clear and defined in terms of how independent directors can be introduced and what informed, how they can be elected into the board. And the appointment and evaluation, I think this is one of the critical parts. Appointment, and there is a limited amount of independent directors available. The code says 50% of your board should be independent. Now that's a huge number if you're talking about. I will give you the real-time example if I were to sort of explain how the composition of the organizations in Middle East are. So 85% of the businesses are run by family-owned businesses. So only left 15% unlisted, listed and regulated entities, and rest of them are 85%. And the study says that only 15% in Middle East region will continue to create value in third generation. That is shocking. And I can see in real life when the throne is passed from a father to his elder son, things starts going into a pear-shape until unless there is a proper plan and professional corporate governance model followed. It's not working. Can you move on to the next slide? No, previous. Before. Yes. There's a lot of text in here, which you can ignore, and I'll talk you through that. See, I have seen myself in the last 2.5 years with BDO, and we've got a wide variety of clients here, running in from a very small family-owned businesses to conglomerates and the listed entities. So I can see the both ends of the spectrum. And I can tell you that some of them have already geared up to that they have to do something differently. It's the suggestions which have been floating around is just that the family-owned businesses has to start letting it go. It's not that the chairman would say, I have founded this business 50 years ago. How would I let it go to somebody and started challenging me on my position? So if you start thinking in that perspective, it will never work. So you as individuals and organizations with family-owned businesses needs to educate your own people that is going to bring discipline to organizations. So an advisory support board can be created where you can appoint a corporate secretary, formalize the communication strategies. Normally what happens in the family-owned businesses, a decision has been given on day one, on that day, and that decision is final. There is no transparency of the strategy, how the decision has been made, and that can lead into the loyalty which an organization has built over the years. A new person coming in, a son or a daughter, can just completely ruin that. Developing the structure, legalizing it, making sure that all the values remain with the shareholders, and ultimately the actual running of the organization can be passed on to people who can really understand the business and dynamics of the business to remain competitive. And then trying to formalize the advisory board and board as a board of directors, appoint a CEO, and then moving on from there, establishing internal audit framework, the FRISC framework, nominating and remuneration committees, to eventually lead into preserving the value of an organization. And it's a continuous process of formalizing the governance model. I think it's going to be damning if the organizations will not formalize things. On the other side of the spectrum, the 15% of the listed and regulated entities, without naming anybody, and I have worked in both Western world and here, I can see that at least from the comparison, there is no ego issue in the listed entities, but the fact remains that for cost purposes, they would reduce the number of independent people in the independent directors in the board, and they would explain, which is allowed under the corporate governance code, that why they are not having independent directors. I think if they were to reflect and think about it carefully, this overall principle-based corporate governance framework has gone through a lot of research as to what works for an organization and what doesn't. So just explaining to be transparent that why you have not appointed independent directors. One of the key one is like the CEO and the chairman of the board should not be the same person. But there is a lot more demand for compliance with their own policy, and this we know culture has to go out of the window. People here in this part of the world actually realize that. But in the true sense, it will only work when they will think about their own, less about their own interest and about the interest of the organization. There's a lot of conflict of interest goes on into these board meetings when a family-owned business's brother or a sister of a relative is sitting in the board, which is composing as an independent directors. I think that doesn't work. So we need to educate as this forum to go back and inform the boards that the more independence and the more following of the principles of the code will eventually lead into better results. And I'll talk about the transparency. So these are two spectrums. One is of the corporates which are already applying it, and the family-owned businesses which are more difficult, more egoistic, more emotional attachment to the business, and breaking that barrier is most difficult. But with this code, you can wave it to them and say how that will impact your organization. And the idea that the end game is to eventually build the trust of the community globally, and that's the theme everybody is trying to follow. The integrated reporting, by the way, is just being worked through. There's more to come. There's a lot of writing required, and we as accountants will be helping more work for us, which is good. But eventually you will be people who will be working in industry, in finance and accounts and in other departments. Everybody will be working together to give more information to the stakeholders. Integrated reporting, globally there is a working party in an international integrated reporting council. Every big four big firms have their own representative there, and Nath is in the working party of the Global BDO International Party to give our own comments on the integrated reporting. there's a lot more to come, and the front half of the financial statements of organizations, listed entities in particular, and the regulated entities are going to look different. But this will evolve over the period of time. There is around 7 to 8 guiding principles and then content element within the integrated reporting section where the firms have to comply with. And just if you were not aware, MOIC is already working on crafting corporate governance, voluntary corporate governance code for small and medium-sized organizations which are effectively not listed, not regulated entities, because CBB has already incorporated in their own rule book all the corporate governance codes as a high-level controls. So there's a lot more to come. MOIC is still working it. It's actually written within the code itself that they have been working. National Council is also working on that. So they watch this space, but they will give sometimes they give time for organization to adapt to it. But that might be, and the UAE has already done it, by the way. In 2011, there is already corporate governance out for medium and small size organizations. So there is some material for reference if you don't want to use the entire big code which is applied to a bigger organization. But trust me, if you read the code, how many of you have actually read the code? Hardly. So the code is quite useful it's not very bulky. I would recommend reading it because it gives you a sense of what they're trying to achieve. And trust me, there's a lot of work and debate going on behind that, so it's always a good document to understand. But the change in the regulation is not the answer. In this part of the world, change in the attitude, change in the mindset is the answer. The regulations are there. The region is in the right place and the right time, I'm telling you, of good corporate governance. In fact, there were discussions that this part of the world, after what happened in Western world, this part of the world can be seen as the center of excellence for corporate governance. And I also support that view because I can see the faster pace of change in the attitude of the boards and the organizations toward corporate governance. And integrated reporting is a sort of reminder for you that it's going to become a reality tomorrow. So it has proven that true compliance with the governance code can protect interest of the shareholders and the investors and attract more investments into this region, which the region is in the dire need of. I think more and more investment which will lead into business for us. But it needs a change of mindset. With that, I will conclude a very powerful quote by Mahatma Gandhi, is that you are the change you seek in the world to be. So if you change and if you adopt, the others will follow your lead. So with that, I will conclude, and hopefully this was useful, and happy to take any questions.
May I invite some questions, please?
And I've been told that after this, there's a treasure chest of gold in the raffle. So you will be getting a lot of gold after this. So please don't ask me any difficult questions. Otherwise, I'll not pick your name.
Of course.
Please, sorry about that. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
No, corporate governance to me is everything starts from back home. Don't use the word corporate, don't use the word governance, but the governance, if back home, what is that? And you also gave a figure, 85% of the businesses are and 15% of the businesses are. So these 15% businesses are which are very well corporate governed businesses. Don't they fail? Don't they falter?
Now, I think one part of my presentation was also, it was out there, it was available, it was implemented, but as you also mentioned, that it was not implemented in its true spirit. And I have seen, as I said to you, sitting in the board, overriding the principles of the code eventually will lead into a disaster. It's a perfect recipe. You have not been applying your own policy which you have created for yourself, because nobody was enough challenge to the board of members for taking decisions. So I agree with you. The code was there, but not implemented in its true spirit.
Thanks a lot, Arshad. What can a family-owned business do to improve corporate governance?
A lot. I have worked with a number of family-owned businesses. They don't want to hear anybody's advice, because they think that 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, our organizations have run in a manner it has been run, and we have been successful. So why I need to change? The world has changed. iPhone was not a reality back then. We were all using Nokia, the big cellular phone. The world has changed. It has changed for good, and the competition and the information and the transparency are being sought by everybody. So if you don't change with the world, you will be left behind. So I think the overall conclusion is the family-owned businesses can do a lot if they go through which model which I have presented to you. If they go through that, understand where you stand in that stages of going from family governance to corporate governance, and then take from there, eventually you will lead into a best practice. And a change of mindset is required. I've been sitting in board meetings where I've been told I'm the chairman and I have all the right into making decisions. Why would I need independent directors? What value they will add to me? And it's just a form filling exercise, a checklist to tick. And I think that attitude itself needs to change to make it a real corporate governance implementation.
Thanks a lot, Arshad. May I now invite our Lady Luck with the bowl.
And would I get some gold coin myself?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. How many I have to take? One? It's a very difficult name. It's from Yusuf Kano.
I know it's short form. It's V. Panchanatishwaran Urf Panchu. We have Panchu? Yeah.
It was a difficult one. Yes. Thank you.
I wanted to go in the afternoon. The purpose is solved.
There's nothing to give to you, just to say thank you for being here. Okay, they were hiding because it's gold. And it's a lot of gold, so you have to sort of give it to your wife, okay, if you have one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Friends, our chapter has been blessed with a lot of dynamic chairmen. And one such dynamic chairman, CA Alok Gupta, may I request him to be here to hand over a token of gratitude to Mr. Arshad.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you. Thank you, and I will say thank you once more, because last time when I was not presented, but still Mr. Gopal told me that my previous memento is sitting in his office. So I'm really, really thankful to the association for giving me this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Arshad. Friends, a couple of points. Please collect your souvenir from the registration desk. There is going to be a grand raffle for the day for members who have registered online. Please keep your badges secure for collecting your written gift from the BCICI? Yeah, which is going to be given tomorrow evening. Yes. May I invite our Vice Chairman, CA Kapil, to hear a few words from him. CA Kapil.
Good afternoon. You can give me a welcome. It is an unplanned presentation here. I wanted to give you a brief summary, 5 minutes only, of the day's proceeding. It goes like this. After a real crisp opening ceremony, Bala's keynote address really proved to be the key to the door of a treasure of knowledge. Jamal Yusuf took us to the history 150 years back so that we can learn for tomorrow. And Sanjay Chakravarti, he was so agile that he not only shared his presentation, also covered the maximum number of questions given to one speaker today, but also ensured that you get your lunch in time. How generous. When we all saw during the lunchtime raining cats and dogs, we were thinking, where is the sun, which was shining this morning? But sun had not gone anywhere. Just after lunch, we saw Surya coming here, and he was preparing us to enlighten us post-lunch. Mr. Surya conquered us all through his composed and meaningful speech. He kept us all awake, isn't it? Yes. And then came Kal, K-A-L, how it spells. If you pronounce it in literal way in Hindi, Kal means tomorrow, our theme. If somebody calls it Kal, it is again time, which never stops, again our theme. And then he talked about how we sustain, and he taught us the true meaning of CSR. Another ace banker, another son, Arun Tiwari, joined us after the afternoon coffee, and my goodness me, how he tackled all those tricky questions thrown on him. All organic answers. Weren't they? Say yes. And then finally, Arshad Gadget came here and asked us, did you get it? And he told us about the corporate governance. It's not only one person, it's entire universe whose responsibility it is. And that sums up the day today. Now, back to you, Mr. Amit Shenoy.
Thanks a lot, Kapil. One more announcement. Somebody told me that the psychological impact of the word sale on ladies and the word CP on CAs is the same. The moment you see, grab it with both hands. So friends, today's CPR is there, but for getting tomorrow's CPRs, you'll have to again register yourself at the same registration counter. And now we have an interesting quiz. A quiz which will ensure that all the CA male members, their wife will send them to all the chartered accountants conferences henceforth. It's a quiz being sponsored by Devji. And for the winners, it's going to happen that the first installment of this particular scheme is going to be paid by Devji, and the rest they can pay. So friends, are we ready for this quiz? Okay, kindly pick up your hand, Please don't answer in silo because they have only 3 prizes. So the first question for this evening is, what is the name of Devji Gold Saving Scheme? I saw that hand first. Swarna Varsha. Yeah, please. It's correct. Yes, CA Panchu. May I invite Mr. Shaji from Devji? Yes, maybe I have a round of applause for CA Panchu. Friends, now let me do a selection bias. I'll look on this side. What purity gold is being offered under this scheme? CA Raghu, please. Mr. Shaji? Yeah, Mr. Shaji, please. Yeah. Yeah, fine. The last question, ladies. Yeah. What is the minimum contribution under this scheme to start? Yeah, Akhila, please. Friends, let's have a huge round of applause for all these 3 winners. That brings me to end of quiz and win, of course. Please wait. Just kidding. Fine. Yeah. Please, ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, Mr. Shaji from Devji. Friends, with this I hand over the mic to our secretary, CA Vivek, to handle the grand raffle. CA Vivek.
Thank you, C. Amit Shenoy, for the wonderful raffle draw. And ladies and gentlemen, it's raining gold, so let me not break the trend. I would like to invite our chairman, C. Meenakshi Sundaram, on stage to draw the first grand raffle, which is a gold coin, sponsored by BCICI for its own members. And I would request Mahesh to pick the first winner. Yes, Sridhar. He's not here. Second, please. Ivan Johnson. Thank you, CM Meenakshi, for doing the honors. We now have 4 prizes sponsored by Al Namal Group of Companies. And to give away the prizes, I'd like to invite our member, CA Thomas Kurian, to be on stage. The first prize is Hawar, family trip to Hawar for 2 people. Hawar is an island located close to Bahrain, and they have a resort there, so they've offered this family trip to our members. Mahesh, can you pick a winner? Bhuvana Paneer. So you can take your blender also there. The second prize sponsored by Al Namal Group is business lunch for 2 people in Olive Restaurant, in Best Western Olive Hotel in the Mantra Restaurant. Can you pick a winner, please? Amit Shah. Our ex-com member is not so lucky to be present here. Another one, please. Jayavardhan. Mahesh next. Sri Bharti. Sri Bharti is not there, but Mahesh is here, but we cannot offer it to him. No, he's not here. Another. Samson. Please. The third prize sponsored by Al Namal Group is a rejuvenation massage in Shantagiri, which is a spa replica of the Kerala style spa. Can you pick a winner, please, Mahesh? R.S. Radhashankar? Gone. Next one. Next one, please. Subodh Kumar? Oh my goodness. I would request C.H. Suresh Shuna to distribute his prizes before he leaves the venue. This is not allowed. The fourth prize is a 6-month subscription to Daily Tribune newspaper. Mahesh, can you pick a winner? Tanmay Kelkar. Next one, please. Nishesh Koirala. Sharad Belur. Charles Sitti. Thank you, C.A. Korean, for doing the honors. Our next prize on the list is again gold. This time we have 2 gold coins sponsored by Devji Jewelers. And I request Mr. Unmesh to be on stage to give away those prizes. Can I have Mr. Unmesh, please? Nitin Gupta, the winner of first gold coin. Mahesh, another one. Ganesh KV. Harish, Mr. Harish Venkakrishnan. Thank you, C. Unmesh. The next prize on the list is a Cartier perfume, and I request our Vice Chairman, C. Kapil Batra, to be on stage to give away the prize. Johnny Chaco. This perfume has been sponsored by Asia Jewelers. Thank you, C.A. Kapil, for doing the honors. Our next prize on the list is sponsored by Expat Group, which is a pearl necklace. I'd request Mr. Jason from Expat Properties to be on stage with the bowl of cards. And those people who drop their cards on the stall of Expat Properties are eligible for this draw. You can pick it up. Mani sir, please. Please, please. Sir, what will you do with the necklace? Sharmila Sheth, Gulf Union Insurance. Thank you, Mr. Jason. That's all, guys, for the day. We have more raffles than this tomorrow, so please make sure you come here. And I hand over the control back to C. Amit Shenoy for the final closing remarks. Amit, please.
Friends, with this we end the skin tilting day 1. But as Kapil said, abhi to raat jawan hai. So friends, see you all at 8 tonight for musical delight. And tomorrow again at 8:45 a.m. where we'll meet for breakfast. Thanks a lot. Desk while going back.